Okay, and we are live right now. But the event let me know that right at 1 p.m. that's when they'll be able to see us, the attendees.
Okay, perfect. Wish there was a way to have the video green on the same place as my shared screen.
What do you mean? Sorry.
Oh, just because I've got two monitors kind of, and I'm sharing the one screen, but then I'm kind of looking over here,
Oh,
which is where you are. But sometimes, like
got
on
it.
Zoom, it'll show up at the top kind of bar.
Yeah, yeah.
It's no big deal.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the session. Just a few ground rules before we get started. So right now, and this is regarding the MCLE credit. What I'm going to do right now is send a form for the attendance. And for folks that want to get credit, this has to be submitted in addition to the evaluation form that has to be submitted at the end of the session. So I will send the evaluation form at the end of the session. So again, in order to get MCLE credit, you need to fill out both of these forms today, and you will get a certificate within this week or early next week for the MCLE credit. So I will go ahead and send over right now the evaluation form, and I will hand it over to Tucker.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, great. Can everybody see this all right? Excellent. So today's presentation, we're going to talk about keys to scaling access to justice with technology. And by way of introduction, my name is Tucker Cottingham. I'm the founder and CEO of Lawyaw. I'm also an attorney. For those of you who don't know what Lawyaw is a technology company that makes it easy to include programmable documents into your digital workflows. So essentially, we're a workflow solution for legal service providers, and we focus on specifically document automation. I'll get into a little bit more of that here in a minute. So the agenda for today's presentation, we're going to start with a little bit of background on Lawyaw, why you're listening to me at all, some of the questions about why technology is vital to LSOs in 2021. We're going to talk about how to evaluate and prioritize technology, because now there are so many options and so many competing priorities. Try to give you some useful tactics to help evaluate and prioritize. We're going to go into some specific use cases. We're going to talk through evictions, expungements, immigration, and remote clinics. And then we're going to talk about adoption and implementation, and things that you can do to sort of try to have the technology implementation land a little bit better. A Q&A. Throughout the presentation, if you do have questions, just feel free to jump in. You can see that there is a Q&A portion on your computer, and it's more fun if this is a conversation. And I'll also put out a couple of polls here as we go. So to sort of set the stage, Lawyaw's mission is to increase access to convenient legal services. And the way that we do this is by providing organizations who provide the legal services with the tools and technology to do that. And for those of you that don't know the specific things that Lawyaw provides, so we have a large court form library. We have over 5,000 pre-automated court forms. They're web-based. We keep them up to date on our side, so we're updating them constantly. They're super easy to access, work on any types of computers. We have all the judicial council forms in California, all the local county forms, and then also all of the USCIS immigration forms. We also have a no-code tool that's built into Microsoft Word. So if you want to take your Microsoft Word documents and turn them into programmable templates, things like letters or motions, really easy to do that. And then you can auto-populate information into those documents. So the whole idea is that you can put in information one time and it'll go into the right places across multiple documents. We have a guided questionnaires product. We have an e-sign. We enable sort of remote collaboration. So because it's cloud-based, you know, different people have different logins in your organization, and you can easily kind of work on the same stuff, which has been really helpful for COVID, and also for some of the remote clinics that we'll get into. And then we also have integrations, and we have a data retention platform. So built into the system, if you come back 3 weeks later or 3 months later, you know, all the information that you entered into one form can be automatically used across all of your other forms or documents. It's very helpful. You can create form sets and then populate them with information. And then we have live customer support and onboarding. So that's kind of an overview of what we have to offer at Lawyaw. And I see some familiar names here, but you know, some of our partners, and the reason that we're at this conference is because we've been working with legal aid organizations for a very long time now. and many of you here we probably already work with. And we work with a lot of the LSC funded organizations throughout the country, a lot of legal aids, but especially in California. We're based in San Francisco. And so our very first project that we ever did when we were just getting started was an expungement petition at a clinic where we brought in the computer and the little beta version. And so really our work with our legal aid partners has been very core and foundational to what we've always done here at Lawyaw. So very passionate about trying to help how we can. And also, if you ever have any questions, these are good people to ask if you're looking for what it's like to work with us. Just some additional background. These are questions that we get a lot. So we're 5 years old. We've been around for 5 years. We were founded in 2016. We work with over 1,200 law firms and legal aid organizations across the country, across 37 states. We've had more than 1 million documents generated on the platform so far, and more than 300,000 signatures filed in California courts. So we can get into that later. There's some hit and misses, some things that are changing with e-sign, but by and large, it's a big trend that's been picking up. So jumping into it, why is technology vital to LSOs in 2021? And not to bury the lead here, it's because we want to help more people with fewer resources. So COVID has massively accelerated the need for legal aid organizations really to help people. This is all stuff that you all, probably very familiar with, but the lowest income people have been the hardest hit. There's 48 million people in the United States who live with somebody that is considered a sidelined worker. Unemployment is obviously way up. 31% of renters with kids are not caught up on rent. And so a lot of the eviction moratorium, there's some legislation that was recently, I think it's going to be passed. I don't know if it's actually effective yet, but this is a huge issue. And then we have 24 million adults, 11%, that did not have enough food in the last 7 days. And this is up from 3.4% pre-pandemic. So these are really hard times for a lot of people. There's a lot of people in need. And the work that you all are doing is just super, super important right now. And we want to help you all to be as effective as possible. And one of the key ways to do that is through digitizing a lot of these legal services. And this is a trend, obviously, that didn't start with COVID, but it's been massively accelerated through COVID. And so the opportunity to transform inefficient and bloated manual processes into streamlined digital processes enables LSOs to scale and to do more with less. And we're really seeing this huge transformation happening across the legal industry in things like Zoom or email or text messaging or fillable forms. People are using case management systems. So a lot of these pieces are already in motion. And one of the things that we realize is that the big missing piece has been having documents be part of these different workflows. And so much of what we do is working with forms and working with documents and trying to streamline things, that being able to have documents that can take in information, that can be auto-populated, clauses triggered, subject-verb agreement adjusted, things like that can be very, very, very impactful. And just in general, thinking about your clients and the people that you're working with and the challenges that they face, making things as easy for them as possible is really helpful. And I know, anecdotally, a lot of people share emails, or they may not have a computer, and so being able to text message is really helpful. Or not having to, get a bus and come all the way across town for a meeting, being able to do things remotely is really, really helpful for people. So it kind of hits on both sides. It makes things a lot easier for the people who need help, but it also allows the organizations providing the help to be able to serve more people with fewer resources. And so I want to talk a little bit about how to evaluate and prioritize technology. So if we all agree that this digital transformation is happening, the potential for technology to really help serve more people with fewer resources is real, and we agree upon that. Then you get into, okay, well, how do we figure out what technology to use? It seems like there's tons of available technology now. There's a lot of things that people want to do. Seems like everybody has more tools than they know what to do with. And so that process of sort of evaluating and prioritizing, what technology to focus on can be kind of confusing. And because we've worked with now, more than 1,000 legal organizations and dozens of legal aid organizations, I think we have some interesting insights into sort of how organizations successfully go about this process. So I'm going to share that with you. And if you all have questions as I'm going, again, just jump in. So before we do that, I want to share a poll with you. What is your biggest challenge for implementing new technology? So I'm going to share this poll, and you should see it pop up. And launching it, and you should see the results come through in real time as well. So I'll update you as to the results. But basically, is it that you don't have a clear idea of what to improve? Is that buy-in from your team to use it? Or is it price? And could be something else. I don't know if there's another option, but among those three, I'm very curious to know what people are seeing as the biggest challenge for implementing technology right now. And so where do you start with this issue? Again, we're seeing all these different options. Everybody has these great fantasies. Where the rubber sort of meets the road is where things get tricky. And something that we talk a lot about at our company, but I think really applies to a lot of organizations, is falling in love with the problem and not the solution. And so this is one of the key things that we see help people to be successful. And so thinking about, what is the outcome that you're seeking? What's blocking you currently from getting that outcome? And what are the things in your control that you can improve? And so really digging into what you're trying to accomplish before thinking about what the different options are. And a lot of times people say, oh, well, I know what document automation is. I know I want to save time, so we're going to move to the next step. And I would really encourage you to be a little bit more thoughtful about that and really start to think about, specifically what do you want to get out of it. And I can give you a couple examples of reasonable outcomes that you could kind of try to optimize for. So one would be, okay, we want to help people with the same or fewer resources. And then you might want to drill into that. How many people are you helping now? What would you be happy with? And so part of this is thinking about a success criteria. What's an outcome where you can say, okay, this worked, we're happy with this outcome. The more kind of metric driven you can be, the better, but just trying to be really specific about that. And I'll get into it shortly, but that outcome is going to be kind of what ends up driving a successful implementation, how you get buy-in from the team, how you actually evaluate if something's working. So this upfront time is really helpful. And, our company, and I'm sure other companies, can help you with that. And so, if you want to get ideas of what other people have, sort of gotten out of it, or what a reasonable benchmark is, those are all things that we can answer. Another thing that we hear is we want to do the same work in 50% of the time. It's kind of similar to the first one, but it's a little bit more specific. Sometimes we want to have fewer errors. We've got, documents going around, PDFs are getting flattened, we can't share files. That results in, these careless errors or, different information on different documents. And so, that's a specific problem we can kind of work for. We want to collaborate remotely. People are remote now with COVID, or they've got volunteers, they've got remote clinics. And that can be an outcome that you want to get out of some kind of technology. And then we have some people that really are prioritizing, we just need a better client experience. Our people we're serving are having trouble interacting with us and actually getting the benefits of the work that you're providing. And so these are kind of just some sample outcomes of ways to think about what problem you're trying to solve with this technology. And I think starting there is really, really critical. Some of the common mistakes that we see, and the most common mistakes that we see, are kind of doing it in reverse. So focusing on solutions before understanding the problem. And so the way that manifests a lot of times is, starting with the tools and then trying to figure out what problem you can solve with it. Oh, this looks interesting. I need to get some technology, and so we know that we've got to modernize and we've got to be more efficient. And so I'm going to go and just start kind of kicking tires and looking at all the different tools that are available. And that can be fine to do, but that's probably not the best way to really evaluate and prioritize the technology. So, sort of getting a lay of the land, that's fine, that makes sense. But once you actually are trying to make a decision, going back to that problem and not getting too wrapped up in the specific tools is going to be helpful. The other thing that we see is worrying about implementation details before really orienting to that outcome that you're trying to get. So before sort of thinking deeply about what's the problem that I'm trying to solve, what's the benefit we're going to get from solving that, getting that really clear is important, because if we don't know what we're going to get out of something, people don't want to put much effort into it. And what we see happens a lot is sort of people getting caught up in the implementation details before they really even have a clear idea of what they're trying to get out of it. And that's really related to this other third most common kind of mistake, which is an emotional resistance to change driving decision making. We don't want to do something different. It feels uncomfortable. It's unfamiliar. We've been doing this forever. There's going to be a certain amount of friction, especially depending on your organization, how technology forward you are, how long people have been working there, how comfortable you are. Change is always hard. Obviously, COVID has forced a lot of uncertainty and change on people, and it's very useful in our experience when organizations sort of acknowledge that there's going to be this change. It's going to be kind of painful, or for some people it's going to be hard, but not having that be the key driver of the best solution to solve your problem. And let's see if we're getting any. I'm looking for poll results. And okay, so it looks like so far we're at 34% don't have a clear idea of what to improve, 37% worried about getting buy-in from the team, and only 28% are price. So this is kind of what I thought. Getting buy-in from your team is kind of the biggest barrier or the biggest concern. So we'll get into that, and that's great. And I'm hopeful that people will participate in the conversation a little bit when we get there. So going back to sort of evaluating the technology, once you kind of focus on that problem and you're able to kind of have a clear outcome that you can start to rally around and kind of share, framing the approach is really helpful, because the next thing you want to do is sort of zoom in one level further and think about a specific project. And one of the key kind of, if you've heard me talk before, if you've worked with Lawyaw, one of the things that you might have heard is we talk about this notion of projects. And the notion of a project is really just a way to sort of think about a workflow. So some people might call it workflow, some people might call it a project, but a project could be something like eviction, a unlawful detainer. So try to think in terms of a specific project. And what you're trying to figure out is, what is a high value project that we can kind of focus on and orient around. And this really goes into like what, not having a clear idea of what to improve as well. So thinking through the different types of projects that your organization handles, and then looking at the frequency. How often does this come up? How long is it currently taking you? And if you don't know and you're not tracking your time somewhere in a system, this doesn't have to be super scientific. You can ask people. Usually if you ask 4 or 5 people, you'll generally get an idea. Okay, does this take you an hour? Does this take you 2 hours? And one of the things you want to account for is every time that somebody's interrupted, I've read that it takes 15 to 20 minutes to get reoriented. And so sometimes when a process is kind of fragmented and long, you get a lot of interruptions during it because it's stretching out over a period of time. And so even though, people might say, yeah, if I sat down in front of my computer uninterrupted, turned everything off, I could probably, do this in 45 minutes. What you want to get a sense of is, how long are we actually spending as an organization on this particular project or this particular task? And so that should account for all of the interruptions and the other stuff that people are doing, to get a sense of how much time is being spent. And then also, who's doing the work? Who's doing the intake for this? Who's actually drafting the first version of the documents? Who's talking to the client? Who's filing the documents? And getting a sense of what this process is. And I'll show you a really cool example of a project that we worked on where we've got the process mapped out really well. And then once you kind of bear down on what's going on with a particular project, then thinking about what's the criteria for a successful outcome. What are you going to be happy with? So if you've got a project that's taking you 2 hours, you're doing it 5 times a week, it's touching 3 different people, what's the outcome that you'd be happy with? If you get that 2-hour thing down to 30 minutes, if one person can handle the whole thing, if you can increase your volume from 5 to 10 per week, trying to think about what would be a version of the world where you would look back and say, I'm happy, this is working. Okay, this is something I can point to and say this is working. Getting that set out before you actually start the implementation is incredibly helpful because it kind of gives everybody something objective to rally around. And we'll talk more about that too. But this is just a really simple way to think about sort of, what is a high value project that we can focus on so that we can be into the specifics and really have something concrete to help us navigate. Let me go here. And then you get to, okay, we've identified the problem, we've identified a specific project we want to improve, we know what an outcome that we're going to be happy with. Okay, how do we actually choose the solution? So now there's a bunch of different stuff that we have. You're hearing things from colleagues or reading stuff on the internet, or you've seen things at conferences. And what I would encourage you to do is consider how the features and services impact your success. And now that you have this outcome, you have this specific sort of scenario that you're thinking about, think about how the features and services map to that. And so, is this something that's going to have a high likelihood of delivering you your desired outcome? If you're doing, if you want to ultimately file a expungement in a lot less time, is an intake form going to help you do that? Well, maybe not if it doesn't map to these documents, right? Or maybe there's a cool way to do some video conferencing, but that won't help you with filing procedures or something like that. So it's kind of common sense, but just sort of looking at the features and seeing how well they map to the outcome you want. Looking at price, obviously that's always an issue. Onboarding and support, I think for legal aid organizations is huge for a bunch of different reasons, but one of them is that it's easy for the person finding the technology to become the sort of default or de facto tech support person. And that may not always be something that you want to do. And so if you can kind of work with an organization that's willing to train your people, that has resources, that has a direct line of communication for tech support for your users, it's just going to remove you from that being that bottleneck piece. And it's just going to make life a lot easier. That's something that I see, especially if you're taking something that you've been doing the same way for a long time and trying to do it in a new way. You're just going to run into some degree of frustration from different people on your team, and you don't really want to feel like you're taking the brunt of that. Remote collaboration, I think that's here to stay for a while at least. So making sure that what you're using is cloud-based, web-based, that works with different computers, that people can be at home and still do their work with the other people in the office. That's becoming a more and more critical feature of a good solution. And I think this idea of practice-specific workflows is also useful, which just means that sometimes solutions don't think about lawyers as their target audience of who they're building it for. And there are some things that as legal service providers, we need that may not be obvious to other people. So having something that's built for legal services, for legal aid, for attorneys, really does end up making a difference, I think, in terms of these what seem like these kind of obscure details, but when you're actually doing it, it's really useful. I'll give you a specific example. In Lawyaw, you can add a custom box to a court form. So if you've got a UD 105 or you've got a FL 150 and you need to add a text box to it, you can do that. In the background of the text box is transparent. And so in some other programs, in older programs that I use, it was always like a sticky note kind of thing, and it covered up the other text on the page. And that became annoying, and it was kind of hard to use. And one of the ways people like to use our custom text box is they put dashes, and they'll say, on the complaint, this is an amended complaint. So little things like that can be really helpful. Or if you copy and paste text that's shrunken text, having that paste in a way that resizes, it's not a big deal, but it's just these little things that if somebody's building it for lawyers, they're going to have hopefully talk to the people that are going to use it, and they've picked up this feedback and put it into their product. And I think it can make things a little bit smoother when trying to implement technology to have that kind of user feedback baked into the product. And so next I wanted to get into some of the LSO projects that we're working on, and kind of to give you some examples of sort of tying that together identifying the problem, thinking about an outcome, finding the right solution, and then actually tying it to that project that you're trying to improve. Seeing if our poll changed very much. No, we're still at getting buy-in from your team being almost at 40%. So one of the first types of projects that is really urgently needed right now is some of the stuff around housing and evictions. And we just talked about, you know, how many people are having trouble and are not caught up on rent. We know that there's eviction moratoriums that are being passed, but this is kind of building up, right? Because people are getting further behind, and it's unlikely that any of us are going to be at a place where now we can pay back, you know, a year or 2 years of back rent. So this is a really serious issue, and it's an urgent issue. And so we're working with some organizations on trying to streamline this. And so these are things like unlawful detainers, fee waivers, motions, set aside default judgments, compliance forms. You know, these are all kind of part of housing workflows that we're able to help with, and we're seeing have a really big impact for LSOs. And this is a project that we're working on now. This is the Legal Aid of San Bernardino with Pablo. And I thought this was really neat because when I was talking about sort of looking at the problem and understanding the current process, you know, this is, yeah.
We do have one question here, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So someone asked if you are currently working with any LSOs on commercial applications for micro enterprise support.
I don't know offhand if we are or not, but I can certainly look into it. I wonder if there are particular documents, like other standardized forms for that, or if there's a process for that. Well, I know that we talk with some organizations that help people start businesses. Yeah, but I'm happy to look into that and see. We can, any document-based process is something that we can work with. So we're not limited. Like I said, we have customers in 35 states and 5 countries. So from our perspective, honestly, it's mostly just, is it a PDF or Word document, and do you, the customer, have the knowledge of sort of the substantive legal knowledge of what needs to happen in it? And so we're pretty agnostic in terms of, we have different languages and we have people using it for all different types of legal projects, both private and nonprofit side. So if we don't, I'm sure we could. But I thought this was a great example of sort of mapping out the process and just really starting to think about the problem. And so we've got our kind of Lawyaw Labs initiative where we'll partner more deeply with certain organizations. And one of the things that really inspired us to work with Legal Aid for San Bernardino with Pablo is they were just so thoughtful about really digging into their current process and problems and understanding how that they could improve it. And so what we ended up with is, we needed to gather information, and here's a intake form. And we needed to then generate documents using that information. Some of that's going to be logic based, and some of that's just going to be filling in the blanks or moving information across multiple forms. But we sort of dug into, like, how does that process work, and how is it working now, and how much time is spent on that. And then once these documents are generated, they need to be signed. So there's kind of 3 key components. You've got an intake, questionnaire, kind of a guided questionnaire, the specific document sets and the documents, and then the electronic signature piece. And when you put those together, you can get massive, massive time savings and give a much more convenient and client-friendly experience for somebody who might be working on their phone and not have access to a computer or not be able to come into the office. So it ends up being just a really nicely tailored project that really fits the problem that it's trying to solve. And all of that sort of originates from understanding the problem. Another example is immigration. And so I know that several of you all have used Lawyaw for DACA clinics and applications, adjustment of status, petition for citizenship. In Lawyaw, we have all of the USCIS forms, so you can go through and you can choose the forms that you want. Again, we'll keep them up to date. We'll pre-automate them, and then you can just combine as many as you want. And so you can pull in attachments. You see here we've got Art Vandelay's pay stub in there. But you can put a bunch of different documents together, and automatically you enter information. Once, it's going to go into the right places across all the documents. And so this is an example where maybe by thinking of the most common type of immigration petition you do, or a couple of the most common ones, using that as a way to kind of evaluate the technology to find the right solution, just gives you something a little bit more concrete. And so people are getting a ton of value out of the USCIS automated forms. And it's not, I guess, importantly, or one thing to think about, for a lot of organizations, they don't want a full-on billing software for immigration. They just want the forms part. They've got the other parts of their workflows they're handling. And so it can be a nice point solution for that too, if you want to just really focus on, we want all these forms to be available, we want them to be easy to access, we want them to be fillable, make it easy to put information into them. This would be a great fit. We're seeing a lot of benefits from the immigration forms usage through LSOs. And then kind of our baby in some ways is the reentry work, expungements and sealings. As I told you, that was the first project we ever worked on. It was the first form we ever automated, was CR 180, CR 181, and the fee waivers. So we've always stayed really close to expungements, super high impact. It's an unbelievable gap in justice, as you know, 30 million plus people with criminal records that are eligible for expungement in the United States. I think 8 million people in California. These are people that are obviously entitled to relief, in many cases mandatory relief, but literally getting your background check, doing the fingerprints, analyzing the rap sheet, which is super poorly formatted, and then putting that in, to figuring out what remedy to use, and then putting it into the forms. That's a high enough friction that the amount of people that get expungements is super low. $68 billion lost of US GDP from people who have criminal records who can't get jobs. So really high impact. The legislation is getting more friendly, but the implementation is still frankly a huge problem. And so so a lot of organizations use Lawyaw for reentry work, expungement work. Just today, I actually pulled a report. We've had 12,244 expungement petitions generated in Lawyaw in California. And so, that's just great to know that, we're able to do a small part. But if you probably added up, putting all that information across, those 4 or 5 forms, however many times, 12,000 times, it's probably a lot of time saved. And almost all of these expungement petitions are being created by LSOs. And so, it's just a really encouraging thing to see. And so here's an example on the left-hand side of where you might have a expungement packet. Again, you put in the information once, that's going to go into all the different forms in the right places. You can set up form sets too, to where you can pre-check boxes. So if you're going to do a 1203.4 expungement, you can have the forms pre-checked. You can have your custom headers in there. You can kind of pre-fill them out and then save them as a set. And then when you want to use it for a new client, you can duplicate that set and pull in that new client information, but your box is going to be pre-checked. And then you can still go in and make surgical edits. But people do that a lot for family law, a divorce packet for no children versus children, things like that. So it's nice to be able to customize those form sets. And then on the right-hand side, you can see an example of the Microsoft Word kind of functionality of being able to build in rules into your Microsoft Word documents, maintain the formatting, populate the captions, and so forth. So yeah, this was an exciting thing for me to see today. I did not realize that we had so many. Another area where we're seeing a huge amount of impact right now in terms of technology benefiting LSOs is with remote clinics. And One Justice, great example. Legal Services in Northern California, great example. The Access Project, I'll show you this in a minute. But what originally kind of was used for getting access to legal services to parts of the state where there weren't a lot of lawyers, or where there wasn't enough legal help available, Lawyaw, sort of in its original original days, I guess, Lawyaw was used to kind of bridge this gap. And so because it's a collaboration software, you can have somebody go out and meet with the clients or the people that need help, and they can then, the person who's meeting with them can put the information into Lawyaw. Somebody else back somewhere else in the state, or really in the country, can then take that information, review the forms, generate the documents, put the packets together. So it enables kind of a nice separation of tasks and labor, and can be a lot more efficient. It also is a way to leverage pro bono volunteers, which has been really impactful. And so some of you all may be familiar with the Access Project, One Justice, Legal Services Northern California, CRLA. All of you all have done really innovative things, I think, with using technology to both leverage volunteer attorneys in pro bono work, and then also to get access to places that that don't have as much capacity in terms of legal aid. And so, that's really high impact, and TAP has been really focused on this for a while. And Nora, dear friend of mine, known her for a long time. And so, probably a lot of you guys have worked with her in the past, I imagine. But what we're also seeing is not just the ability to sort of connect people through technology, and in some cases, what TAP is doing is working with law firms and getting the pro bono lawyers at the law firm who can be at the law office, and they don't need to necessarily even leave the building, to be able to help significantly with expungements or evictions or whatever the case may be. But now we're also seeing a lot more of the remote clinics just happening, internally. What used to be a in-house clinic is now, because of COVID, a remote clinic. And so being able to use technology to sort of separate the gathering of information and the analysis and the generating of documents, but keeping everything in the same place, reviewing work, giving permissions to people so that they're not seeing your entire client base, but you can share access with just one client at a time. That can be really, really high impact stuff. And we're seeing that picking up a lot. And I think that that's just a super interesting model for how to really increase access. So I want to make sure we spend a little bit of time on that. And if anybody's interested in this, this is like a particular area where I'm just really excited and would love to talk with anybody that's interested in sort of how Lawyaw or other technology can help with clinic settings. And so those are kind of three or four of the projects that we see a lot. Hopefully that'll give you some ideas of how you can start to streamline things. And if you're looking for, not knowing what to improve, we're always happy to talk more about that and can share more examples. There's dozens across family law, civil litigation, collections, license, getting your license back, benefits issues. So there's really, people are using Lawyaw for all kinds of legal issues. And those are just a couple of the ones we've selected to kind of show you some different types of projects, but happy to go into more detail if anybody wants to talk further about that. So kind of following this thread of, okay, we've found a problem that we want to solve. We've decided on an outcome. We've thought about a particular project. We've evaluated some different technology, and we've figured out a version that we're excited about. We think it'll give us the outcome we want. We can afford it, and it's going to enable collaboration and be web-based. All those things we talked about. And then you've got your project specifically you want to do. You've got it mapped out, and now you buy the software, and to the poll that we just had, you're running into problems, right? And so I want to spend a little bit of time on this and send you a different poll, which is kind of a similar question, but it's a little bit different. What's the biggest challenge from implementing workflow automations? The other one's a little bit more general, but if you're thinking about, okay, I want to streamline our workflows, and you're going to come with a solution, because I think all legal aid would benefit immensely from streamlining the workflows. It's your own language. You're producing the same exact work. They're the same forms. There's literally no difference. You can still spend manual time on the parts that need your manual time. And so I don't think there's any LSO that wouldn't benefit from streamlining workflows. But what do you think the biggest barrier to doing that would be? And I'm gonna share another poll here. And hopefully you all get that. And we'll check back in on the results here. So the options are general feeling that it won't work for my organization. So just sort of a feeling of, and I say that, but that is a real thing. A lot of people do have that response. Identifying the specific documents to streamline. So we want to do this project, but we don't really know what documents or what version of them. The time required to set it up. I have a super good idea of what it is. I have a super good idea of what it requires, we don't have anybody that has the time to do it. Or then again, for getting buy-in from my team, I'm going to bring this thing and just nobody's going to be excited. People are going to be really worried about the small details, and it's not going to get off the ground. So those are kind of the four options here. Okay, and so some ways that we've seen organizations be really successful implementing technology, and this is even in organizations with 100 attorneys, or attorneys that have been there for 25 years doing the same things, or people that are not tech savvy. And I would say that in the legal aid world, there are a lot of people that wouldn't consider themselves super excited about technology or super tech forward all the time, which is totally fine. That's very understandable. And so some of the things that we've seen people do to be successful are to orient around those outcomes. So those outcomes that we talked about at the beginning become really important when you can say, what we're trying to do is not change the way you're doing something just for the sake of changing it. We're trying to save your time. We're trying to help more people. We're trying to avoid errors. We're trying to make delegation easier and allow people to work remotely. We're trying to give our clients a better experience. And so kind of orienting your team and getting buy-in around that outcome, is that a worthy outcome to pursue? That's a really, really, really critical first step, because otherwise people feel like, oh, I'm just taking this thing and that I'm really familiar with, and now somebody's telling me to do it differently, and I don't really know why, and I wasn't part of the process, and I don't really want to do it differently. So I think getting that buy-in and that orientation around, what are we trying to achieve? Is this a worthy goal? Is this a pursuit that everybody agrees with in terms of the outcome? Okay, now what do we have to do to get there? That's what we've seen be really successful. And then the next part is starting with a control group. And so we've seen a lot of really successful implementations where, and this isn't just for our software, this is for a lot of other technology too, but particularly our software, is being really transparent about the plan. Okay, we're going to try out this software. We're going to start with these 10 people. We're going to let them try it, and we're going to see what they say, and we're going to have a meeting, and then we're going to roll it out to other people. Or we're going to roll it out with one practice group first, or whatever it may be. We're going to try it for one project. But being transparent about the plan, focusing on a particular use case, so not just kind of go in and click around, but hey, could you try to generate immigration packet or a eviction packet, and just let us know how that goes. And then finding the people that are good with technology. So there's almost always, in my experience, we work with thousands of organizations now. In my experience, there's almost always somebody in a legal office, whether it's legal aid or private, that is kind of the technology person, and there's almost always somebody that can be identified as the not technology person. Like, this person is not going to like this, regardless of what it is. And then this person is probably like the most tech savvy person. So for whatever reason, almost every conversation I have, if I ask that question, they'll respond very quickly with specific names of people. And I don't know these people, but they'll say, oh yeah, that's George or whoever. So it helps to start with the people who are good with technology first and roll it out to them, because at least you're going to get a sense of, if somebody's fully interested in trying to make this work, is it going to solve our problem? Then, every office has the people who they know are going to be resistant to change. And if you're transparent at the beginning, just saying we're going to try to vet this as much as possible before interrupting what you're doing. And if we have a lot of conviction that's going to work, and we've vetted it and a couple people have tried it and it's working, then we're going to work with you to try to, help you transition to this. What tends to get really poor reception is when somebody feels like, I wasn't included in the process. I didn't know anything about this, and all of a sudden there's a calendar meeting that we're going to have a totally new thing happen on Monday. Or just sort of randomly, we're going to sunset this old thing that I've been using. My whole systems are there. People don't like surprises, and so I think telling, what I've seen work really well is sort of telling people, this is our plan. We're going to try to get it vetted, and we're not going to really try to interrupt you too much until we have a lot of conviction about this. That tends to work really well. And then I'm looking at the poll results. Interesting. So the poll results right now are 50% time required to set it up, 21% general feeling it won't work for my organization. I love that. I just think that's super interesting. It probably will work for your organization, but that's obviously a very common kind of sentiment, right? Okay, so that's the first part, is starting with the control group. So just to go back, orienting around the outcome, starting with the control group, and then onboarding and training. And this is kind of what I touched on earlier, but if you can avoid becoming the tech support, that's going to be helpful. If you can find companies that will offer onboarding and training, that's going to be particularly helpful. Particularly if it's kind of like if there's webinars that people can watch and there's live support. So if there's resources available for people to watch or to consume on their own, and then also some live component or a real person component, because it can be really hard in legal aid organizations, but also just in law firms in general. People just, very rarely is everybody in the organization available at the same time. If you do a live training, getting 30 people in the room, it can happen, but it's a big deal. Some people would rather watch that video at night or on their own time. So trying to kind of think about that onboarding and training component can be really helpful. And just a really easy way to do that is to centralize the resources and best practices, and to be able to say, okay, here is where we're going to keep links to the videos and examples and whatever other information can be helpful, but kind of putting that stuff together so that, okay, if you have a question, go here. That tends to work really well. And then setting expectations. So this is the other thing we see a lot. If you're buying a new software and say you're replacing an old software that's 20 years old, you're not trying to replicate the exact same thing as the old software. And it's helpful to set expectations, just say, this is a different software. It's not this software from 20 years ago exactly the same. And so things are going to be different. And I think that's just a good thing to lead with. And this, may seem obvious, but we have these conversations a lot, which is, this very small detail that was in the other software isn't in this software. And that's just what I'm used to. And I get that. I experience the same thing myself when I switch, doing something a different way than I've always been doing it. But I think just having that out in front and just saying, like, this is going to be something we're going to have to deal with. And then that, it's going to take some work. And so I guess just setting that expectation that what tends not to work really well is if people try to oversell it, like, oh, you're just going to click 2 buttons, everything's going to be fine. It's going to be even better than anything you ever did in the first 10 minutes. It's going to be amazing. So trying to set expectations of, this is a worthwhile outcome to pursue. It's going to take a little bit of work. A lot of other people have done it successfully. It's not something we can't do, but kind of acknowledging that, I think, validates the frustration that a lot of people just feel in terms of changing how they do things. And then incremental progress is good. So, okay, we're going to, over the next several months, we're going to improve these processes. We're going to start with housing, and then we're going to try to test it with the immigration and see if that works. And we're going to, kind of expand it from there, but sort of embracing this notion of incremental progress, I think, with technology adoption is helpful. It also makes, allows you to celebrate the small wins, like, oh, we did this one thing, better than we did it before, or this one goal worked. If you're kind of always waiting for the finished version, the final, perfect outcome with anything probably in life, you might be waiting for a while. So being able to give yourself some markers to sort of celebrate along the way, feel good about it incrementally is really useful. And then this is confusing because we're a document company. I'm meaning here, write down the outcomes and improvements that you're getting. And so if you can say, okay, how long did that take you? Oh, you did it, half as fast. Let's write that down. Because coming back to those things can be really helpful, and having a record of, okay, this is what we set out to do. This is working. We're getting the outcomes that we want, and being able to kind of just have that documented. Also, anecdotally, I've heard like a very useful thing for funders and for people who are supporting and donors who are supporting the organization. Seeing those kind of metrics can be really helpful and persuasive. My understanding is that if you can say we can increase our capacity by 25% or 50% for a few $100s a month, that can be really motivating thing to fund. So always, recording and documenting outcomes, improvements is going to be helpful, and it gives you something concrete to point to. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I want to leave time for questions. Just want to also just say genuinely thank you guys, everybody that's doing legal aid work right now. You guys are doing amazing work, and this is a time when people need help more than ever. And everybody that's doing this work chose to dedicate themselves to trying to help our communities, and we all benefit from that immensely. And oftentimes it's not super recognized work. And so personally, I just want to say thank you very much for everybody who's dedicating themselves to trying to solve this problem as we see this gap getting bigger, and so many people that really need a lot of help right now. So thank you. Okay, we can go to questions here if anybody has any questions. Time to set up dropped a little bit, it's 46%. No questions. I'll move to the contact slide so that you all have our contact information. Yeah, feel free to reach out to us. I'm always happy to talk, share what we're seeing, best practices, put you in touch with people. Anything we can do to help, really genuinely, we appreciate you and would like to be helpful in any way we can. So thank you very much. Hope you guys found some useful stuff, and I think you'll have a copy of these materials as well.
Thank you so much, Tucker. Really appreciate it. I can definitely speak from experience that Lawyaw, I absolutely love Lawyaw. I love anything that's user-friendly, and Lawyaw is the definition of that in our remote clinics. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Oh yeah, I'm great.
Yeah. So what I'm gonna do, everybody, I'm gonna go ahead and link the evaluation form right now. Just a reminder for folks that want to get MCLE credit. The the form that I posted earlier, the record of attendance, that needs to be completed in addition with the evaluation form for this session, which I will go ahead and link right now. And also, we are about to start at 2 o'clock our Pro Bono Opportunity Fair. So for folks that are interested in that, please go back to the main stage and you will see really great organizations, and feel free to connect with them. So let me just go ahead and give me 1 second. I'm going to link the evaluation form. All right, so I just linked the evaluation form, and like I said, you all should be receiving an email in the next few days. And that concludes our session for today. I hope you have a great rest of the conference today, and we're also looking forward to seeing you tomorrow as well. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.